countdown, we have the Enfield haunting. This is the house and case that The Conjuring 2 was based off of. The case involved a young girl named Janet Hodgson, who was said to have been possessed by a spirit. The spirit would throw objects across the room, make noises in their house, and sometimes would even levitate Janet into mid-air. Ed and Lorraine Warren were assigned to this case and to expel the evil entity responsible for all of this. But turns out that Janet and her sister Peggy made up this whole thing. In 2015, when Janet was 45 years old, she said that her and her sister faked some of the phenomena. So according to researchers, most of the paranormal things happened when no one was actually looking at the two girls. Like, they would have their backs turned to them, and then all of a sudden an object would be thrown through the air. Well, obviously the girls were doing that themselves. They also said they captured audio of a dresser falling over on its own. But upon closer inspection, footsteps could be heard leading up to the dresser before it fell over, meaning someone likely pushed it over. And the photos of Janet apparently levitating in midair looked like she just jumped off her bed. So the whole Janet being haunted by a ghost, yeah, that was made up, and the Warrens went along with it. In our 9th spot, we have the credibility. Okay, now I was diving deep into Reddit looking at what everyone thought about the Warrens when I came across a post from a user named Jack_Shid. Jack claims that he worked alongside the Warrens for a couple of cases. He proceeded to reveal that they have no credibility and it's pretty much all BS. He goes on saying that he thinks they just fell in love with fame during the whole Amityville haunting, and they created their business from there. So it could just be that they make up all these hauntings just to then make a book to then make money. But before I go any further, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up because it really helps us out. Moving on, at number 8 we have the Amityville Horror. Probably one of the most controversial paranormal cases of all time. Because in the end, the whole thing was just one big sham. So here's a little rundown. On November 13th of 1974, Robert Butch DeFeo killed his parents and his 2 brothers and 2 sisters. The house was put up for sale and the Lutz family moved in. And apparently the demon that got Butch to do that horrific deed started to attack their family, and their doors and cupboards would swing open and close, green slime would ooze from their ceiling, and one time a demonic face with red glowing eyes was seen looking into the house. So on and so on. The Warrens went to investigate and confirmed that the house was haunted. But clearly that was a lie, because guess what? Butch's lawyer, William Weber, admitted that he made up this whole story along with George Lutz. They created the story over many bottles of wine, they said. They admitted the house was never really haunted, they just made it all up. Which means so did the Warrens. In our 7th spot, we have the Werewolf Man. This was a pretty weird case if you ask me. But a man named William, or Bill Ramsey, claimed to have been possessed by a werewolf. Apparently he used to try and bite his family and also had superhuman strength. At one point he managed to rip a post right up from the concrete. So on and so on, you get it. He was claimed to be possessed by a werewolf. The Warrens were sent to exorcise this demon out of his body. And they talk all about this in their book, Werewolf, a true story of demonic possession. But a lot of people aren't buying this story. I mean, they haven't produced any photos or material evidence. And the story just seems so hard to believe. Like, a man possessed by a werewolf, and then he gets exorcised and he's just magically cured? No, a lot of people think that this case was all a sham as well. Moving on, at number 6 we have the illegal relationship. A woman named Judith Penny came forward saying that in the early 1960s, she had a relationship with Ed Warren. This was going on when she was not of age. Ed was apparently in his mid-30s when he met Penny. Penny was 15. The two began to have a relationship with Lorraine knowing. In 1963, she moved in with them. She stayed in a bedroom right across the couple's room in their home. Now, Penny ended up coming forward with this because of how their relationship was displayed in the movies. They looked like such a loving, perfect Catholic couple. But they weren't. They had their dark side, especially Ed with his relationship with a young girl. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the baby. Now, Penny went on to expose a lot about the Warrens. In fact, in May of 1978, she got pregnant with Ed's child. But guess what? She was forced to abort the child. Apparently, if word got out, then this scandal could ruin their reputation. In fact, when Penny was living with the Warrens, they would lie and just say she was their niece or a poor girl that they took in out of the goodness of their own hearts. It's pretty sick if you ask me. Penny literally didn't have a choice but to get rid of the baby. In fact, they wanted Penny to tell everyone that someone broke into her apartment and took advantage of her, and that's how she got pregnant. She refused to do that, and they got so mad that she was terrified. Like, that's so heartbreaking. Moving on to number 4, we have the toxic relationship. Again, in the films, Ed and Lorraine Warren seem like a perfect demon fighting duo. You can tell that they love and care about each other dearly. Except, according to Penny, this wasn't the case in real life. She said that Ed was very physically and verbally abusive towards Lorraine. In fact, she said that one time she witnessed Ed backhand Lorraine so hard that she lost consciousness. In fact, he would often slap her across the face to get her to stop talking. Penny literally said, and I quote, "Some nights I thought they were going to kill each other." That is terrifying. In our 3rd spot, we have the Lady in White. One famous ghost is one called the Lady in White, who haunts Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. According to the legend, she's the victim of betrayal by her lover, and she died either by taking her own life from being heartbroken or by being killed by her lover. Well, Ed was determined to capture her on tape and enlisted Penny's help. In fact, Penny helped keep Ed's reputation as a ghost hunter. So in the summer of 1990, Ed apparently camped out in the cemetery for a week trying to make contact with this ghost. The two faked a video of the Lady in White, which was just Penny. Anyways, he went on to make great claims that he made contact with her, but hardly any evidence was provided, just a few shadow ghosts on video, which we now know was Penny. Coming in at number 2, we have the SMURL haunting. Back in the 1980s, the SMURL family swore that their house was haunted. They would hear loud noises, smell foul odors, and hear pig grunts. Apparently, whatever was haunting their house also threw their dog against the wall and pushed one of their daughters down the stairs. Of course, Ed and Lorraine came to investigate, and they claimed it was haunted. They even said that they saw a message appear on a mirror that read, "Get out." But get this, members of the clergy were brought in to do a blessing and exorcism. And guess what? They reported nothing unusual happening there. But the Warrens were adamant that the house was haunted, and they turned the story into a book and then made money off of it. And in our number 1 spot, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. In 1981, a man named Arn Cheyenne Johnson was arrested after fatally stabbing his landlord to death. But his case was much different than others. He claimed that the devil made him do it. In fact, his case was the first court case where the defense was arguing demonic possession. And guess who was involved in all of this? Ed and Lorraine Warren. But turns out that Ed and Lorraine Warren might have concocted this whole story for him. So according to the story they put out, Johnson's brother-in-law, David Glatzel, was the first one to become possessed by a demon. He claimed a man with big black eyes and a thin face with animal features was controlling him. Johnson eventually went on to taunt this demon, telling it to stop bothering David and to take him instead. And I guess the demon did what he asked, because then Johnson was possessed by this demon, and that's what made him kill the landlord. But according to David's brother Carl, David was never possessed. He was just mentally ill and needed help from doctors. He then claims that his whole family was manipulated by the Warrens. They created this whole story about demons in an attempt to get rich and famous. According to Carl, the Warrens promised his family that they'd become millionaires if they would insist that both Carl and David were haunted by demons. In the end, he ended up suing the Warrens for trying to exploit his brother's mental illness, and for also attempting to get a guilty man to walk free.
Number 10. We're starting off strong with the Devil Made Me Do It case. If you're a fan of Ed and Lorraine, you know this one. The Devil Made Me Do It case is arguably one of the most famous cases that Ed and Lorraine ever worked on. But beyond the supernatural, this case was right in the public eye. Not only were there demons and the supernatural, but the scrutiny of the public eye made this a whole different monster for the Warrens. A bunch of people outside of the courthouse making claims and threats over the case isn't easy to deal with. When 19-year-old Arn Cheyenne Johnson took the life of his landlord and blamed it on the devil, Ed and Lorraine jumped to his defense. They were convinced a demon had entered him after he tried to save his brother from a vicious possession a year earlier. His younger brother was possessed by 43 demons, and Arn commanded that they leave him and enter him instead. The Warrens fell under immense scrutiny, but according to them, the court had defended accounts of God in the past. Now it was time to defend accounts of the devil. But one thing remains strange to me. Arn was never exorcised after the event. Does that mean they are still with him? Number 9. Highgate Cemetery. Where were they for the vampire hysteria at Highgate Cemetery? Like, where were you? When I learned about this case, I was flabbergasted, and it's weird to me that they weren't there. They've dealt with werewolves but missed out on vampires completely? The Highgate Cemetery in London, England has some of the oldest graves in the world, making it the perfect breeding ground for ghosts, ghouls, goblins, and vampires. Ooh, it's spooky season. The Highgate vampire case caused a media uproar in the 60s that culminated in two magicians facing off to see who could catch the vampire first. It all started when two girls reported seeing the dead rise from the graves while walking through Swain Lane one night. Soon, animal carcasses drained of blood started turning up. Newspapers had their cameras ready. A massive vampire hunt was organized on Friday, April 13th, in 1973, and bodies were even exhumed from their graves to see if they were toothy. Sadly, no one caught anything, but the case still sends a tingle down the spines of vampire enthusiasts around the world. Legends of the demon, though, continue, along with sightings of a crazed old woman and corpses appearing in places they shouldn't be. Number 8. The Bell Witch. I searched the internet far and wide to see if the Warrens had ever visited the Bell Farm, but alas, no. If I'm wrong and I missed something, post a link down in the comments because I'm not perfect and maybe I missed it. But as far as I can see, they never actually checked out one of the most famous hauntings in the world. 200 years later, the Bell Cave remains an attraction, and many still report hearing a shrill, scratchy voice when no one is around and see orbs surrounding the farm, or where it used to stand. Though the actual events happened well before the time of the Warrens and the farm was torn down, the Bell Cave was still there. If there was any duo who could have proven the tale of the Bell Witch, it was them, but maybe, just maybe, they were afraid of what they might find. Number 7. Michael Taylor. The Michael Taylor case is one of the strangest I've ever come across while doing lists like this, and it certainly needed Ed and Lorraine. The horrifying events of Michael Taylor happened in the 1970s, specifically 1974. A man who was considered a good husband, father, and community man suddenly flipped. He began enduring bouts of severe depression and was visiting a 21-year-old pastor named Marie Robinson for counsel. His wife was obviously suspicious, but the sessions were helping. Mary allegedly performed many exorcisms on him to expel the demons. Taylor's wife was getting pretty antsy, and they ended up having a confrontation during which Taylor attacked his wife. It was after this moment Taylor resolved to undergo a full-blown exorcism on October 5th, 1974. During this, Michael had seizures, he spit and bit the ministers, and screamed in tongues. Unfortunately though, it did not expel all the demons, and Taylor returned home in a rage. He took the life of his wife in an incredibly gruesome way, and was later found screaming in the street, naked and covered in blood. I don't think the Warrens ever encountered anything as violent, but imagine if they did. Number 6. Richard Gallagher and Julia. Richard Gallagher is a man I find entirely fascinating because his transition from being a man of science to a full-on believer of the occult is, for lack of a better word, insane. Now obviously the Warrens had their domain, but imagine if these guys collaborated on this case? What? Though, I don't know if Gallagher needed the help, just saying. The case I'm referring to is when Gallagher encountered a transformative possession. Gallagher became the go-to guy to diagnose people who claimed to be possessed. An Ivy League psychiatrist, he would help those who were mistaking mental illness for something mystical. Julia was the first time he encountered someone he couldn't explain. Julia was the queen of a satanic cult and had become possessed, which she desperately desperately wanted to be rid of. Skeptical at first, but when Richard sat down to talk to her, she knew intimate details about his life. Objects would fly off the wall, and once during a phone call with the priest, they both heard one of the demonic voices she'd speak in around them, even though Julia was across the country. Number 5, the Thornton Heath poltergeist. It was the 1970s. Thornton Heath, England. Where were the Warrens? Probably busy, or too scared to bother with such a terrifying case. It all started one hot August evening when the family living in the house was awoken by their radio suddenly blaring to life. This was just the beginning to a terrible haunting the family would endure for 4 years. Objects would fall or be thrown across the room by invisible hands, you know, all the usual poltergeisty things. One night, the son awoke to find a man standing at the end of his bed, like staring at him with like venom in his eyes. After a bunch of startling incidents, they tried to have the house blessed, but it failed. However, a medium did discover that the house was haunted by a couple named the Chattertons who considered them trespassers on their property. The family eventually had no other option but to move out, and the activity has since ceased. But imagine if the Warrens were on the case, probably would have been solved so much sooner. Or not, who knows. Number 4, the Danny poltergeist case. In 1998, a woman named Jane Fishman reported strange happenings regarding an antique bed in the home of Al Cobb in Savannah, Georgia. It was a vintage 1800s bed that Cobb bought at auction for his son, a purchase he later regretted. 3 nights after it was purchased, Jason, the son, told his parents that someone was watching him on the bed. He felt cold breath on his neck and saw the impressions of elbows dipping into the pillow. He also noticed the photo of his deceased grandparents lying face down on the dresser, which became a reoccurring event. After he put it back up, it'd fall back out. But then, one morning, an assortment of strange objects, including animals made from shells, was found on his bed after he'd already gone down to breakfast. That got his parents and his twin brother's attention. They left paper and crayons out and asked the ghost what his name was. Then later they came back to see Danny 7 written on the paper. After several communications and a smashed terracotta planter, it was clear that Danny didn't want anyone in his bed. The family eventually got rid of the bed, but that didn't solve the problem. Turns out Jason's connection to the spirits went skin deep, and he continued to see things after the event. Number 3, here we go. The Winchester house. This place is on my bucket list to visit, so it's a wonder to me why the Warrens never checked it out. Again, I googled it, they didn't. Prove me wrong in the comments. I welcome correction, as always, thank you. But it's essentially a 24,000 square feet mansion with 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 160 rooms, 52 skylights, 47 stairways and fireplaces, 17 chimneys, 13 bathrooms, 6 kitchens, and cost Sarah $5 million to build, about $71 million today. There are stairs and doors that lead to nowhere, windows that don't open. It's a labyrinth of mystery. Sarah Winchester and her husband William Winchester amassed a huge fortune from their sale of the, you guessed it, Winchester rifle. After her daughter died of TB and William left Sarah a widow, she consulted a medium who told her that she would constantly be haunted by the spirits killed by the Winchester rifle. The house never stopped construction until she died in 1922. It is said the house was built to trap the spirits inside. Today, it's considered one of the most haunted places in the world and is well worth a visit for anyone seeking a scare. So where the heck were the Warrens to debunk this thing? It would have been awesome. Number 2, the Amityville horror case. Obviously, I had to put this case on the list because this case remained the scariest event of Ed and Lorraine's career.
It had the monstrosities of the night which roamed that house, which infested it, which caused a young man to murder his whole family.
The events at Amityville, Long Island in 1975 shook the nation and the box office. The Lutz family moved into their dream suburban home with optimism and hope for their life. But little did they know, a year earlier, Ronald DeFia Jr. shot and killed all 6 members of his family, priming the property with evil. The Lutzes didn't know what to make of the swarms of flies, loud, aggressive banging noises, disturbing entities, and even levitations occurring in the home. So they got the hell out of Dodge, leaving all their belongings in the process. When they finally called the Warrens in, George Lutz, the father, who was, by the way, an ex-Marine and karate expert, literally supposed to be fearless, wouldn't even meet them at the house. They met at a Pizza Hut. But as soon as the Warrens began working on the case, they understood why.
The Amityville case affected our personal lives more than any case we ever worked on.
To this day, Lorraine says that this is the case that haunts her the most and said that She hoped this was the close to hell as she would ever get. So if that's not too scary, I don't know what is. And now we are getting to number 1. The Warrens. Demons, poltergeists, and ghosts. It was hard to find a case that the Warrens wouldn't face. They seemed fearless, their love strong enough to withstand all the forces of darkness, or at least that's how the movies told it. It turns out that the real case the Warrens were too afraid of was the horrifying truth of their marriage. Yup, we're going there. If you're a fan of the movie franchise, then you know that Lorraine had a lot of influence on the stories up until her death, but a weird detail in her contact alludes to some nefarious activity in their personal life. Neither Ed or Lorraine Warren could be depicted violating anyone or performing adult acts with a minor. The reason that was in there might have something to do with the case of Judith Penny. Penny stayed with the Warrens as a young woman and allegedly had an inappropriate relationship with Ed, and Lorraine knew about it. Judith made a legal declaration in November 2014 stating that Penny and Ed had begun an amorous relationship when he was her bus driver and she moved in with them in 1963. That same year, Penny was arrested when someone noticed the illegal relationship between her and Ed. Why she was arrested and not him remains in question to me, but Penny also stated that Ed was abusive towards Lorraine, saying, and I quote, "Sometimes Ed would actually have to slap her across the face to shut her up. Some nights I thought they were going to kill each other." Lorraine denied the allegations through representatives, and there are still a lot of loose ends, but I suppose whatever happened has already been taken to the grave. Number 10. The Devil Made Me Do It. In 1981, 19-year-old Arn Cheyenne Johnson sparked controversy far and wide for a crime he wasn't behind, or so we think. While arguing with Alan Bono over Johnson's girlfriend, Arn stabbed Bono, resulting in the man's death. When police arrived, Arn claimed that the devil made him do it. When the words "the devil made me do it" came from his mouth, it sent the world into controversy. Apparently, Arn was possessed by a demon that had not been vanquished by the Warrens at all. Ed and Lorraine had worked with his family a year prior when Arn's girlfriend's brother David was possessed by not one, not two, but 43 demons. In order to save him, Arn commanded the demons to enter him instead, so when his dark deed finally occurred, Ed and Lorraine flew to his defense. The Warrens stated that at the time of the exorcism, and I quote, "Johnson leapt up and cried to the demon, 'Come into me, I'll fight you, come into me.' But from that time on, he was possessed." The Paranormal Society was split in half, but Johnson's team was committed. The court had defended acts of God in the past, like a lightning strike to a tree hits a car, you know what I mean? And now it was time to defend accounts of the devil. But despite what you believe, it wasn't enough, and Johnson received a maximum sentence but was released after good behavior just 4 years later. But still, the fact that these demons were never truly vanquished left the Warrens terrified that this might be the case elsewhere. Number 9. The SMURL Haunting. Jack and Janet Smurl sound like they should be like the leading couple of a comedy featuring Jennifer Aniston and Jason Sudeikis. But of course, wrong list. The plight of the couple attracted the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren after a series of dark and ominous events struck, of course. In the 1970s, the family started experiencing shocking technical mishaps like their TV bursting into flames and toilets flushing by themselves. I know, do ghosts poop? Apparently. At first, they didn't think anything of it, but then the knocking started, in a peculiar pattern of 3 followed by terrible sudden odors, making the Smurls feel ill. The strange noises and smells were swiftly followed by sightings, and thus entered the Warrens. The Warrens discovered a presence of 3 separate demons, and despite 3 exorcisms, the family reported the return of the demons until finally they let go 15 years later. Number 8. The Haunting in Connecticut. The mortuary turned home for the Snedeker family in Southington, Connecticut definitely created the perfect breeding grounds for a scary story, one that left even the Warrens uneasy in their skin. First off, moving into a mortuary? No thank you. In the 1980s, the Warrens took on the case of Carmen and Al Snedeker, who were being tormented by a series of restless spirits and demons. So in this case, it's not just one, but many that they feared. The family reported the smell of rotted flesh lingering in the house because, I don't know, it was a mortuary, and that the taps would turn red out of nowhere. The eldest son was plagued by visions of ghosts, and both Carmen and Al reported being sodomized by the ghosts. It's a very specific activity. Which led to the Warrens making the discovery that whoever the morticians were, their activities were not always professional, if you get my drift. I don't know what's worse, the demons themselves or like the people who used to live there. Ugh. Can't handle that. This was one of their most confusing cases and remains under scrutiny to this day, but the Warrens knew whatever it was had to be exorcised. But the question is, was it really, or is it just hiding out until someone else comes along? Number 7, the Enfield haunting. I don't know what it is with the 70s, man. It just seems like so much weird stuff happened. We had serial killers. It's nuts. But it just seems like it's one of the strangest times in history, what with violent killers and violent hauntings. The Enfield haunting took place in Brimstown, England, and remains one of the more boggling cases the Warrens worked on. Peggy Hodgson and her family claimed to have seen furniture and toys being thrown and moved by unknown forces in their homes. They even claimed that violent voices were heard and that their children were levitating in the air. They caught the photo of the girls levitating when the investigators set up a wired control camera into the room, which periodically caught images throughout the night. Whatever it was, the Warrens knew there was a demonic entity within the house and immediately set to work. Number 6, the Perron family case. The Perron family lived in the old Arnold estate, which inspired the scariest film I have ever seen personally, because if you've watched me on Central Dark, you know how low my tolerance is. But anyway, it's still awful. Yeah, you know it, you've heard of it. 8 generations of families lived and died in the old house and apparently never wanted to leave, or never could. When the Perron family moved in the 1970s, the advice they got was to leave the lights on always. Why didn't you leave then? I don't know. I don't know how that didn't send them running for the hills. The house had been rife with tragedy, but one of the 3 people who took their own lives was an alleged Satanist whose activity was responsible for the possession of the house. Her name was Bathsheba Sherman, who became a demon that Lorraine will never forget. The demon would physically attack the daughters of the Perron family, with one reportedly seeing a floating head screaming and retching at her. Ugh, I almost didn't say her name, but I did, so we'll see what happens to me now. Number 5, the Shadow Doll. The Shadow Doll is literally the doll of your nightmares. The Shadow Doll comes from unknown origins but was kept in the Warrens Museum for safekeeping. But what we do know was that it was used for satanic rituals, and that the thing is doused in black magic and contains human and animal bones. Whatever possesses this thing had the Warrens take it into their possession to ensure that it caused harm to no one else. Legend has it that if you take a picture of the doll, it will possess your nightmares. But it won't just be any nightmare. It will be the most terrifying you've ever experienced, and some have even suffered heart attacks from them. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't they just burn the thing? Well, what's more dangerous? A demon you can see right in front of you, or one free to wander wherever it chooses? Honestly, I take the spider approach with this. If you see the spider, you know where the spider is, you're good. As soon as the spider disappears, burn your house down. Number 4, Valak. This one is a little controversial because was it just made up for the films? We don't know. Valak is a real demon mentioned in the Lesser Key of Solomon that was introduced into the Conjuring series of films. Though her direct involvement with Lorraine and Ed is under debate, Lorraine's belief in the demon was very strong. Valak is referred to as the Great President of Hell, and usually chooses to appear as a small winged, 2-headed creature thing resembling a child. Valak is said to command 30 legions of demons, and in the film became the leading arch nemesis of the Warrens. We'll mention Borley Church in a second, but Valak was portrayed as a nun. But there is some speculation that says that they may have actually encountered him throughout some of their worst cases. Lorraine often said that she encountered a black, shadowy vision of a dark entity whenever she wasn't working on a case, and believed that she was being followed by something she couldn't explain. Want to know more? Stay tuned until the end of the video and make sure to like and subscribe while we're here. Number 3, Borley Church relates to Valak. We'll talk about this in a second. The grim history of Borley Church is the perfect setting for a horror film. The land upon which it is built used to be the home to a 14th century monastery, where a monk fell in love with a nun at a nearby convent, which led to the monk being hanged, and the nun was bricked up alive within the walls of her convent, which sounds pretty friggin' extreme if you ask me. It sounds like evil resided there long before Ed and Lorraine made the trek out to sort out whatever demon lay between its walls. Whoever did that to those 2 poor people, ugh. That's awful. This case inspired the famous nun apparition, as I mentioned, as the youngest daughter of the family who settled there reported seeing her figure. She was also pushed and slapped hard enough to leave welts behind, and that was just in the 1800s. When Ed and Lorraine visited, they obtained photo evidence of the hauntings. Ed captured the image of a monk leafing through one of the books at the altar, and Lorraine experienced a black entity rush past her phallic. She remembered feeling an overwhelming sense of evil. A picture revealed later showed that the shadow of a nun was rushing past her, so that's where the image came from. So was it phallic? We don't know. Number 2, the Annabelle doll. You knew. Probably the most famous of the hauntings conquered by the Warrens was the Annabelle doll. It would almost be a crime not to mention it. Dolls are already eerie with their like black, piercing, beady eyes that look like there's nothing there. But in this case, the most terrifying part was the thing behind it. The case dates back to the 1970s when a Raggedy Ann doll was innocently purchased from an antique store for her daughter. Soon the doll began raising alarm when it would change positions in the house, boggling its owners. But when the notes started showing up saying help me and help Lou, then they came home to find it covered in blood, and they decided then that they needed to call a professional. The first medium they called in said it was just the spirit of a girl who passed away, but then the owner, Angie's boyfriend, was attacked. Enter the Warrens. They knew the doll was in fact a demon based on the marks of the beast and other encounters. They removed the doll and took it home, vowing not to take the highway, concerned that whatever was within the doll might cause an accident. Indeed, their brakes stalled or failed several times on their way home, putting their life in jeopardy several times. It wasn't until Ed doused the doll in holy water that the problem desisted. The couple was so concerned about the doll that Ed routinely said a prayer over the doll every single night. Alright, number 1, the Amityville horror case. The setting: Amityville, Long Island in 1975. A place rife with satanic manifestations set on driving whoever entered to violent madness. As soon as I even say Amityville, you know where this is going. One of the most famous Warren cases, this haunting continues to land on the conclusion that there are just some things that can't be explained. A year before the Lutzes moved into the suburban home in Long Island, Ronald DeFay Jr. shot and killed the 6 members of his family. So it's no wonder that during the first month of living there, the Lutzes experienced swarms of flies, loud banging noises, disturbing entities, and even levitations. The Lutzes moved out and left all their belongings behind, and George Lutz, the father, an ex-Marine and karate expert, so clearly a tough guy, wouldn't even meet the Warrens at the house. He met them at a Pizza Hut. He was that scared. The Warrens said that this case affected their personal relationship to each other the most out of any case they've worked on. This entity followed the Warrens home the very first day, and Lorraine described being incredibly fearful. There was something she just couldn't explain. To this day, Lorraine says that this is the case that haunts her the most, and said, and I quote, she hoped that this was as close to hell as she would ever get. Number 10. The SMURL haunting. I know what you're thinking, it was already done. Considering it was one of their most famous cases, but surprisingly, it hasn't really been made into a movie as part of the current universe. The 1991 film The Haunting left something to be desired, so why not try again? Could it be that the name SMURL doesn't really sound that scary? Maybe. Well, the story itself is. The haunting took place in the 1970s when the family started experiencing outrageous technical mishaps, such as their TV spontaneously combusting and toilets flushing by themselves, which could be handy depending on the day you're having. But then lingering like terrible odors like sulfur and strange knocking that would always come in threes started plaguing the family. The odors would even make the family ill and would be swiftly followed by sightings. When the Warrens finally arrived, they discovered the presence of 3 different malevolent demons. Even with 3 different exorcisms, the demons kept coming back. So maybe change the name, but this has a franchise written all over it. Number 9. Vampire coffins. The Warrens Occult Museum infamously held some of the world's most dangerous demons. As a fan of the occult genre, I am itching for Ed and Lorraine to take on some kind of vampire tale, as they do have vampire coffins in their museum. So what's the story behind them, right? Like where did it come from? Most people associate the Warrens with tales of possession and poltergeist, but what about those of the toothy variety? Did they believe in them? Have they fought them before? Well, apparently the one they had in their possession was used by a real life vampire, and the couple insisted that they're real. So guys, Warren versus Dracula? Come on. Come on, film world, bring back some scary vampires, I'm in. got my steaks ready. Number 8. Pearls of Death. Sadly, the museum I mentioned before is currently closed due to Lorraine's passing, which might be a good thing depending on how you look at it, because who's taking care of those items is my question. There are more things in there with nefarious past than your mom's bin of leftovers, the Pearls of Death being the most famous. These sound like they came straight out of Borgin and Burke's from Harry Potter. It is said that whoever wore them was strangled to death by whatever demon possessed them. Talk about clutching your pearls. How did these pearls come into their possession? Not much is known about their background, but that hasn't stopped horror writers before. Either they tie them into the Conjuring universe or build an entirely different story. I definitely think there is some untapped potential here. So let's get after it. Number 7, the Shadow Doll. Now, Patrick Wilson has already done a whole series of films based on nightmares. Insidious, another favorite of mine. But Patrick, what's one more? I think we all want to know more about the Shadow Doll, another terrifying object from their museum. This doll is literally the stuff of nightmares. The story goes that the doll slithers into your mind while you sleep and morphs your dreams into nightmares so terrifying they can stop your heart. It also looks way more frightening than the real Annabelle doll itself, which I personally think has run its course. Why not introduce another haunted doll to the directory of reasons we shouldn't own them, right? The Shadow Doll should absolutely be next on the list. We've got Chucky, Annabelle, the Shadow Doll. Perfect. Let's go. Number 6, Maurice Theroux. We're basically halfway there with this story. This story is already turned into a book and the movie should be next. Satan's Harvest by Ed Lorraine tells the story of his possession and his Catholic exorcism. It's a really odd story with a lot of layers filmmakers could peel back to reveal an outstanding film. Maurice Theroux didn't have a very healthy childhood due to the cruelty of his father. He developed a lot of trauma specifically due to a particular obscene event in a barn, which definitely affected his mental well-being. So he prayed for salvation, which he believed he received. Maurice reported growing physically very strong, and he suddenly seemed to know things he shouldn't. When he finally settled down with his own family, he was finally considered normal and to all accounts very kind. But then he started losing chunks of his memory, and small fires started to appear across the town. Maurice committed several heinous crimes, including attempting to take his wife's life, and he also attempted suicide. But the strangest things about this are the multiple accounts of people seeing him in 2 different places at the same time. The story doesn't end here, and I'm sure the movie wouldn't either. Number 5, The Apprentice.
People used to be afraid to say stuff. I don't want somebody to think I'm nuts. That's what you would always hear. Now it is the fact where people are looking and they're searching. They want the answers.
2 words. John Zaffis. Of course, Ed and Lorraine are the names we all know and love, but what about the man on the sidelines? What did he see? John Zaffis was Ed's nephew who became a paranormal expert in his own right. He has over 43 years of experience going head to head with the demonic and the depraved. He has appeared on multiple television and radio shows to discuss cases and collects rare haunted artifacts like that of his uncle. As he got his start with the Warrens, it would be interesting to see a series of films that branch off from them, perhaps in an entirely different universe, so who knows. Number 4, the Southend Werewolf. Again, yes, this is what I am waiting for. I mentioned wanting to see them tackle vampires. Werewolves, they have to be next, and there is already a case that exists. Half the work is already done, now we just need Hollywood to do its thing, make some magic happen. The Southend Werewolf surrounds a man named Bill Ramsey who, when he was just 9, ripped a fence post out of the ground. When he got older, his possession caused him to admit himself to a hospital due to chest pains which he interpreted as a heart attack. While the nurse was checking on him, he fell into a rampage where people described his appearance to be very dog-like. Doctors couldn't diagnose a mental illness that suited his symptoms, so he sought help from Ed and Lorraine. He went to the US, and there they performed an exorcism that cured him, but not before several people witnessed him turn halfway into a wolf. Like, come on, this could be the next best werewolf film since Ginger Snaps, right? Like, though wildly different, very different from that movie. Number 3, The West Point Haunting. Ghosts in the military? I bet producers are just waiting to pull this story into the universe, and I agree. Make it a movie on its own, why don't you? In the 70s, of course, the Warrens were called into a military academy in West Point, New York. Officers were complaining that they saw moving objects around the cabin and couldn't explain them. Lorraine sensed 2 spirits, one by the name of an Irish cook named Molly. She was particularly fond of knocking over bottles of wine and messing up freshly made beds. Then there was another named Greer who was the spirit of a Buffalo soldier turned murderer. See, this is where it gets darker. The man was tried, but there are no records of what happened to him after the trial. See? A mystery fitting for the Conjuring universe to expand and explore? Maybe Molly puts secret messages in the stew? Who knows? Number 2, Borley Church. This is already a drama. Now we just need the flair of Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. It's also the closest reference to The Nun, but they are not directly related, which is why I think this deserves an actual retelling. The origin story of the haunting is so sad. In the 14th century, a monk fell in love with a nun at a nearby convent, and the two broke their vows and carried out an illicit affair. When they were finally caught, they were punished viciously. Far too cruelly, I should add. The monk was hanged, and the nun suffered the fate of like the cask of Amontillado. She was bricked up alive behind a wall, all for falling in love. This is the church where the idea for the nun arose, as Lorraine reported feeling a dark presence, and later a dark shadow in the shape of a nun was photographed near her. So I know they've done the whole nun story to death, so the whole Borley Church story might not fit in the narrative, but as a standalone, why not? Last but not least, Ed Warren's origin story, right? Okay, so this isn't actually a case file, but Ed has stated repeatedly that the reason he got into paranormal research was because of his upbringing. We've had little glimpses into his past throughout the film series, but what about a whole movie about it? Ed didn't want anyone else going through what he did, but what happened? At the age of only 5, Ed saw a glowing orb in the horrific image of a woman's face come out of his closet. The couple met when they were really young, and Lorraine didn't initially believe in ghosts, so what happened to change your mind? It would be fascinating to see an origin story for the couple that became the figurehead of the paranormal.